This regional reuse system that's a collaborative Dixie Spirit project is the undertaking of our time. Right. Back in Santa Clara settling in St. George and Washington, where we had the diversion dam up here and we built canals to flood irrigate and maintain life.
Yeah.
This regional reuse project, until Lake Powell Pipeline comes, is what will provide for life and livelihood in the desert.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in on this episode. I had Mayor Kress Staheli. Thanks for this conversation. We had a great conversation. We talked about a bunch, but the big three, which have been on a lot of them, we talked about jobs, which I think was huge, and I'm excited for what's happening there. We talked about water. We talked about housing. Make sure you get out the vote. Primary election September 5th for the St. George City. Washington City is not going to need a primary because they only got 5 running, but then the general election is in November on the 27th, I believe. They've moved it. There's going to be a big name on the ballot. That's your congressional district, seat 2 for the state of Utah for the federal, is up for election on this ballot. So we got to make sure we get informed, educated, and this really helps, I think, everybody watching. So follow us, subscribe, vote stg.com. We'll see you guys.
I'm big on, I want somebody that's in CD2 that actually lives in my district first. And then if I had my preference, it would be someone from Southern Utah. Right. Because we've never had a representative in Congress from Southern Utah.
Even though we have 4, there's 4 that go out to DC.
They're all on the Wasatch Front. They're all within 45 minutes to an hour. They all fly out of Salt Lake City.
They all live the exact same life.
And I want somebody it would be historic to have someone from Southern Utah.
Yeah.
Someone with like some literal red dirt in their shoes.
Yeah.
Not just placate to the South, but
also that we almost have to run our own little state. Because we're legitimately on an island. We don't have any metropolitan support. We're so different. And like not being able to have a representative in Congress to talk about freaking water is crazy to me. Because as much as they're not living in the same environment that, my family are. They are farmers. This impacts their life. Yeah. How could somebody that lives in the Salt Lake Metro really understand that? I get it that there's time is long and short, but at the same time, we're for sure different down here.
Well, and I think Congressman Stewart did as much as anybody could to understand it. And first of all, he lived in the district.
Yeah.
But he spent so much time down here. He has been, and his staff have been champions on the water issue, right? Yeah. With Warner Valley and other lands issues, right? It's like Northern Corridor is a big deal.
There's a gal running that was a part of his. Celeste Malloy. She was impressive as well. So I was really impressed with Jordan. I was really impressed with Celeste. I thought it was funny that
we're right on the same page.
She didn't stand up to do any of the, like, she was asked the questions. She just sat there and just talked, like just blankly, matter of fact. And she just looks, she looks so nice. And then I was told by somebody else, they said she's doesn't take crap from anybody. She's a fireball. She's like, I'm here to get things done. There's not a lot of play. It's not a lot of play time. It's like, we're here to get to work. And I like that. I like that, the feeling that somebody's just a get it done type of person. I respond better when somebody's yelling at me than if somebody's like kind of passively getting to the point. I do way better if they just hit me in that.
She's super direct. And while she did good in the Davis County debate or wherever it was up north.
Yeah. Last night,
her and Jordan both hit it out of the park last night.
I mean, nice.
I was there. I sat there. I was second row watching both of them, and I was really, really proud because those are Southern Utah candidates.
Did they shuffle up the stage?
They did, and Scott Reber's the other kind of Southern Utah candidate. One of the others, of course, there's Bill Hoster. But Scott Reber, Celeste Malloy, and Jordan Hess were all part of that first 6, and then the other 5 came on in the second crop.
I'm gonna need to get involved because I would love to moderate.
You'd do great.
It'd be so much fun. It'd be so much fun. Okay, so Blake, will you click on that 4th tab, the economic development tab?
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, so this, if you're watching online, this is really helpful. If you're a citizen of Washington City, it's great, and it's really valuable to anybody that lives in Southern Utah. But Your team just kind of put this together about a year ago, right? I think this was just a year, maybe a year and a half ago that you finally.
Yeah. So and you can click on the top right hand corner to kind of maximize the screen. But Rusty Hughes, our economic development director.
Click on the actual map, Blake, on the rectangle. Yep.
Yeah. So this has just been so helpful to put into perspective all that is happening in Washington City.
Yeah.
So if you look at the blue, like kind of the blue icons with the house, those are residential developments.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the gold, those are commercial. And then I believe the purple is more industrial, but you can click on any of those and then detail down to all of the
that is way cool.
All of the approval. I mean, to the plat map, to the elevations, and
that's gonna be commercial industrial. Mm-hmm. So anything zoned commercial industrial will be in that blue,
all the way down to the individual projects. And I think this also puts into perspective a little bit just the amount of work that a city does to accommodate the growth.
Yeah,
I mean, sometimes it's easy to say city, you're hard to work with, but it's like, look at all of this. All of these projects are going through the entitlement process. They're being inspected. They're being approved. And we're really looking out for the citizens a city's role is to provide the services of modern day convenience.
Yeah, right.
And so this puts into perspective some of the things that we're doing.
That's awesome. Okay, so as we zoom in and out of here, I'm most excited about what's going on out in the airport.
Yeah. Go south.
You did a video with McCrae Hepler. Shout out to McCrae. What's happening in Southern Utah. You guys shot about a 5-minute video kind of on this project. Why is this project so important?
You look up north and they talk inland port. You look other places, they talk about port. This project right here, 276 acres, high-end, wholesale, assembly, distribution space, will provide jobs. It will provide significant property tax revenue.
This is a 21st century factory, essentially, right? Where you're like, it's modern technology doing a myriad of things. It's not just a one thing. Yeah. Is that right?
We intentionally don't call this industrial space because it's so much more than that. The thing that your listeners might be able to relate to is when you drive into the north side of Las Vegas and you look at like the Amazon distribution center and some of those buildings, that's what we're talking about. I mean, literally one of those buildings on the most recent map showed a 900,000 square foot facility.
Wow.
I mean, we're talking 5 million square feet of high end. Freeport West is very reputable. They're the number one industrial warehouse distribution space owner in the state. They're a major player regionally, nationally. These buildings will be first class, and we're talking 5 million square feet of space over the next roughly 15 years.
Wow. Okay. And so it's as the parkway curves around, there can be these massive buildings out there.
Yeah. Really attractive. We've seen some of their buildings in northern Utah. Yeah. And click on it there if you can on the purple, and it might show. I haven't.
And in either way, when you're driving over the freeway, let's be real honest. When you go from Southern Parkway and you're driving from Desert Canyon, or if you're in Desert Color and you're headed to the reservoir, you probably will barely see them. Because the road slopes down, you kind of go through the hill because the road cuts the hill, and then by the time you're probably level and able, you might be able to look back and see them. But maybe on the approach, I guess you'll be able to see them.
You will see these, and there will also be an additional on and off ramp location right there at ARA, and so they're still working out. So if you see the border there. The darker area is Washington, the lighter area is St. George, but we're trying to tie in more directly to the airport, but you'll have another, probably an 85-foot minor arterial road off the interchange. And then on the east side, that'll open up for future, Warner Valley growth and development there. But this is just a monumental development. The buildings are super attractive. It's a great team. And what's so cool about this group that they come in, they don't sell off the buildings.
Okay.
So they have never, they own 10 million plus square feet of space throughout the West.
Wow.
They don't sell. They buy, they hold, and then they allow for that flexibility for growing companies to expand as needed. So this creates industry. It diversifies our economy. So this is probably, if I don't do anything else as a mayor, bringing this in for future benefit to our region, I will have been super proud of my time here.
Yeah, I think this is a cool project, but your question or your statement made me question saying, why should I be worried if they did sell them?
What I'm saying is the quality of this look. I mean, to me, as my city builds out, sometimes we jokingly say, and we love our neighbors, but we say, if St. George is Phoenix,
Okay.
Washington is Scottsdale.
Okay.
So we're very concerned with how do things look? How do they feel? What is the site plan? What is the approach? Because these buildings are going to outlive us.
So what you're saying is that you just want the developer's going to come in here. They're going to make it go from land to building and maintain that building and keep investing in, the businesses that are going in there to maintain its look, so that it doesn't like you build a building and then they're like, oh, we're out of business, sorry, and then there's nobody there.
Yeah,
is that what you're saying?
So you look at other industrial parks, so to speak, and people come in and build, and the buildings are nice, but it could be a bit of a hodgepodge of what the buildings are.
Okay, yeah.
These buildings will all have a consistent look and feel. Yeah. They'll have this beautiful glass professional entryway on them. They'll have the same aesthetics. The grounds will be landscaped and maintained. And so this, as people come into the St. George Regional Airport, they come into Washington County, we want them to have their first impression be a positive impression.
Right.
And so not only will this diversify the economy, provide jobs, provide for, good products to come in and out, either on the freeway, freight on the freeway or by air, but it will also show really well to Washington County is legit. And we are.
Yeah, and we are. And I think it's really important too that the economic development side, on the questionnaire that I send out to all the candidates for the election, it's housing, because I'm the realtor, right? So housing is important. And we go down the list. I put water at the very bottom because in my opinion, at this moment, it's out of our hands. We're doing every single thing possible. Everybody just needs to take a deep breath. Lord blessed us with a bunch of rain. Take a deep breath. Let's not make this like this huge wedge topic. It's not the most important thing. What the most important things to me are find jobs. We need jobs, higher paying jobs, so families can live here and the community can continue to blossom, right?
Absolutely.
And then make sure that we're, correctly planning for the lower income group, because it's the lower income group, no matter how we slice it up, is going to be the young family, right? There's the older group that has lower income, but it's such a small percentage. When you look at the whole pie of life, it's a much smaller percentage. We got to get houses and rooftops in Southern Utah and allow that to go forward. We can't just keep single family residential 10,000 square foot lots, right? We can't do a bunch of those anymore.
Well, I love the points you're making, and I would love to address each of them.
Yeah,
I would love to address the high paying jobs. I would love to address housing, and I would love to touch on water. So when you're talking, West Valley has some of these buildings up there. They have like a post serial distribution. They had specialized bicycles and cool outdoor equipment. These kind of jobs provide livable wages.
Yeah.
I want to point you to whoever's running the computer. I want to point you to another project, and then I want to pivot over to some of that attainable housing, because
let's do it.
The workforce needs a place to live if there's going to be a workforce.
Right.
Go up towards exit 13 there, if you know where that is, up along I-15, just to your...
too far.
Yeah, see, there you go.
Dino Cliffs Trailhead.
Washington Parkway, Black Bear Diner, you see that? See the little yellow, the gold cluster right up a little higher.
Yep,
right in there. Zoom in there. And that one in the middle to your left, that little gold star, yes, right there. Click on that one. That's the Sienna Hills Auto Mall. Okay. So this is another project, and I got to brag for just a minute. But for the second year in a row, Washington City was named as the #1 small city in America to start a business, period.
Nice.
This is over 1,300 cities nationwide were ranked best and worst. And cities ranging from 25,000 to 100,000 in population, and we are #1 back to back. So I think people see Washington City as a value stock. I think they see the culture and the upside potential. But click on that Sienna Hills Auto Mall. This is another project, in addition to the RS Southwest Logistics Center, that we're super proud of. And this is a development by the Wheeler Group. It's going to be 8 to 10 high-end, high-tech auto dealerships that, from a city standpoint, will provide sales tax revenue, which allow us to provide the services that people want when they choose to live within an incorporated area.
Right.
It also, what I hear is that the average salaries will be somewhere between 80 to 120,000.
Right.
So it's also going to provide jobs. So this is a great example of how not only does government not just get out of the way, but it embraces and supports capitalism and that free market economy. So, and it takes some work. I mean, to bring ARA in, we had to work with the other taxing agencies. I mean, it was a grind, and also with the Wheeler Group. But you've seen, years and years of back end work, specifically the last year and a half, starting to come to fruition. Yeah. And it's cool as these things start to come out of the ground and take shape.
When you start to actually see them, because, this idea happened so long ago, and talking to Stacey Young about like the history and the development of the fields in Little Valley, right?
Yes.
How it was hatched, we're talking Lake Powell Pipeline's 25 years old. This idea is not like, life is short and long. It's short and long. So we can't forget that it's also long, but this is cool. This auto mall is going to be amazing, man.
Yeah. So right now we're finishing up Merritt Way, which is the road that kind of ties through, and then once that road is reconnected, it's going to allow for. There's been serious interest. We've broken the ground, but we have Findlay Hyundai committed. But then I think other dealerships that have shown interest will follow suit, and it could take off quite quickly. There's really not, this whole area around Exit 13. Yep. There's just so much upside potential there.
Yeah, and there, I think there's the shakeup in the auto industry as the prices of cars has been crazy. I think there's this contraction going on too that might have just been delaying decisions to be made. Like I remember before COVID, this is like 2018, 2019, Costco announced that a Whole Foods was going to open in Southern Utah. Like it was a news article and it has a star in Southern Utah. I'm like, well, it's going somewhere in St. George, Washington, right? There's no other place for it to go, right? So I was like, I bet you I know where I could probably find it, right? But then COVID happened and it was just like, poof, gone, right? These ideas, a lot of times they take right turns and they take a little bit longer. So we might be a little bit longer out on this one. What else? What other? The ARA's super awesome. I'm excited about that. So we talked about this really brings in jobs, right?
Absolutely.
The dealerships and things like that. What other avenues of job growth are you looking at? Is there any others that you're excited about?
So those are the two primary that are just legitimate diversified jobs that aren't construction or sales or professional services. But there's really there's kind of a blank slate of things that can happen. Around, if you go back towards Exit 13 there on that north side, Washington, I sometimes call us a young old city. And our growth has been exponential literally over the last 3 decades. I mean, historically, Washington has really relied on our friends and neighbors in St. George for the goods and services that we buy. But now as we're coming into our own, I kind of did my mayor's message last December, and I kind of did it in a funny way, but
because you're pretty funny, dude.
I made Christmas.
You always like making people laugh, dude. Every time I've ever seen you, no, but you always want to laugh. I love that about you. Man. I think it's awesome.
But I said my Christmas wish list would be this. I said, a hospital, and I said a grocery store or additional grocery stores, and a new post office. And those are things that a growing community. Those are just kind of staples or pillars of the community that we need. Right. So we would love to partner with any healthcare provider on a hospital. There's been talk on the north side. Those conversations are still happening. We would love for additional clinics to pop up. I mean, we're pushing 40,000 in population. Yeah. St. George might be about 3 times our size, maybe not even quite. But you could add up Santa Clara, Ivans, Hurricane, maybe even Enterprise, and their population wouldn't sum what we are in Washington. So I'm advocating really hard for economic development and for some of those other community services as we kind of build the brand and identity of our young old city. And it's fun. This is an exciting, this is the best time to be involved in government in Washington because things are happening and they're happening fast and they're really exciting.
Yeah. And because there's a couple challenges with Washington City. So going to the meeting the other day, water and our capacity as a city in Washington City to have any more of their own water, they're getting to the end of their ability to get water outside of just purchasing more water from the Washington, the Conservancy District, correct? So, looking at where, there's going to be some constraints around water consumption, really housing has been maxed out in Washington City. Is that pretty?
Not even close.
Not even close.
Not even close.
You feel like as far as a population goes, how much more runway do we have?
Right now we're around, as I understand, around 35 square miles.
Okay.
I'm already feeling pressure from individuals, from groups to annex additional property in Warner Valley, which would double the size of our municipal boundary.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And
that would make a lot of sense because the reservoir in Sand Hollow is in the hurricane area. This would give Washington an ability to extend that.
So with water, it's most of our communities. Washington isn't alone in having basically, pun intended, tapped out our municipal water supply.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
But collectively, we have an agreement amongst the municipalities with the Washington County Water Conservancy District to be our wholesale water provider.
Right.
So
I love that role, by the way. Like looking at the function of that, I really do like that. I think it makes a whole lot of sense, and it allows for not one city to feel like they're a drain on another, or it's definitely a community effort. We got to be
it's how we do it in Dixie, right? Yeah. We work together. We work collaboratively. And, I have the opportunity to sit next to Mayor Hart on that board. Yeah. I sit next to Commissioner Iverson and others from within the community. And we look at water holistically. Yeah. So we're looking to source water. And while we keep our eye on Lake Powell Pipeline, we're doing everything we can to source other water.
And conservation is legitimately, though, like something we cannot forget.
Conservation is the tip of the spear. But what we're working on right now, and if you want to go down to the edge of Washington Dam Road out toward the Long Valley Trails, another 2,500 unit development.
Yeah, D.R. Horton, they're cranking out,
and they're cranking it out and doing really well. But on the other side of that mesa is where the Warner Valley Reservoir. Okay, zoom right back in there.
Zoom back in. You're too far. There we go.
So you see the cluster of the blue and green on the other side of that mesa there to your right in there, back towards the mesa, right under where it says Sand Hollow Resort. That's the general area for the Warner Valley Reservoir. And that'll be a 60,000, a little bit back to your left. Long Valley Recreation Area, that little green, there you go, right down there. It's kind of long and narrow.
Yeah, it's long and skinny.
And that'll be about a 60,000 acre foot deep reservoir. And what that's charged for is to be the reservoir for our secondary water system. And it's ideally located there because if you just go to the north a little bit, you see the Virgin River and the was once an open ditch that flood irrigated all of these fields is now a closed canal. But as this water is used throughout our community and it's processed down at the St. George Sewer Treatment Facility, currently some of it is pumped and stored. Most of it just dumps right back into the Virgin River and flows down.
Right.
But with a $600 million investment, sounds like, well, we'll work with our state and federal partners, and we are working with those partners on that. We can take this sewer water, and reuse it by pumping, piping, storing in Warner Valley, and reusing it.
Yeah.
That's exciting. This is the shorter term. You talked about long term and short term, and Lake Powell remains a long term goal. This is a short term viable project that we're working with our representatives on all levels of government to make this happen.
What do you think is what's the biggest holdup? I use this example because Jeff and I joke, if we needed a reservoir, right? If the dam broke, and it was 1910, every man, woman, and child that could carry a shovel went out and fix the dam. And in Santa Clara, it failed like 7 times in 10 years.
I mean, this was what,
so like, why can't we just make a dang reservoir?
So yeah, there are so many levels of bureaucracy in Southern Utah.
I know. I try to boil it down to the small,
but really, like, it's funny. Talking to Zach, he has this flow chart that just kind of blows your mind with all of
Zach
the levels
Renstrom.
of.
He's funny too.
He is the absolute perfect person to be
So
working
good.
on this. He's patient to a fault. Sometimes as a board, we're like, boom, boom, boom.
I need to get him on this podcast. I need to do it.
And talk about witty, but we are working through those steps. In fact, I did hear some word from Senator Romney's office that we're making progress. I was promised to keep some of that progress quiet for now, but we're making progress on the land exchanges and the funding.
Okay.
But this regional reuse system, that's a collaborative Dixie Spirit project, is the undertaking of our time. Right. Back in Santa Clara settling, in St. George and Washington, where we had the diversion dam up here, and we built canals to flood irrigate and maintain life.
Yeah.
This regional reuse project, until Lake Powell Pipeline comes, is what will provide for life and livelihood in the desert as we conserve, as we initiate better ordinances to be better stewards of our landscaping with localscape or desertscape, and as we just rethink, how we're approaching water, and it's cool as we learn and grow. In fact, I wish I could remember his name right now. I'm embarrassed, but we have the conservation manager from the Southern Nevada Water District who's working in our district.
Oh yeah, and he helped design, or at least he was a part of the Vegas plan, right? And we're modeling it a lot based off of the Vegas plan.
He's originally from New Mexico, and I'm so embarrassed I can't remember.
That's okay. That's all right. That's not your fault.
But he is so talented, and he literally was the driving force behind their plan. And frankly, for less money, he came, rather than retire, he came up to Southern Utah. And I think it's just like a passion project for him. He's already done it
once. So it's like, and he did it in Vegas. Yeah. So if he did it there, he's like, I could do this.
And he's able to really cut through, what are legitimate water saving measures and approaches and what aren't.
Yeah.
And he's so well connected. I mean, the Colorado water user, group is complicated. And so he has some of those relationships and some of that institutional knowledge, but we're going to get there.
We need partners. It's got to be a coalition. And I interviewed Cox before he was elected as governor, and we talked mainly about water. That was all. It was like one of the earliest. If you go on the YouTube page and you watch it, it's just me, because the camera, for whatever reason, Zoom didn't record the version where he was talking, so it's just me like listening. But you could listen to this conversation he has about water, and I was honestly shocked how he's like, "Yeah, we don't really have any attorneys on that, and everybody else is all lawyered up, and we're kind of behind the 8 ball."
No, but it was right.
But that was because they felt so much confidence in that the agreement was clear that we could get the straw. We could get our little straw.
And it's naive.
It was naive. It was a little naive. It wasn't naive.
Doug is his name.
Doug.
I'm going to say Bennett. I'm going to be wrong.
Doug. I forget names all the time.
But I'm on air here.
And it's right on the tip of your tongue. We'll just edit it in, and it'll just look like you said
there
it.
You go.
No, I'm just kidding.
There you go.
Doug, if you're out there, we love you. We appreciate the work you're doing and bringing it to us in little old Southern Utah. We need as much help as we can get, but I'm excited about the coalition that I've seen so far in asking the questions. I got in an argument with a guy on Facebook. I know you're not supposed to do that, but I can't help myself sometimes. So I took him.
It's the Scottish blood in you.
It's the Scottish blood. It's just whatever.
Can't hide when your last name's
Napoleon syndrome was thrown around when I was a kid because I was little. I am little.
Yeah, I get you. I hear you.
And so, but yeah, so he, freaking keyboard warrior. So I took him to lunch. I was like, let's go to lunch and talk about water, because he posted something because I was talking about Black Desert and how it's a cool project. I think it is awesome, right? And no matter what, he'll always write, but where are they going to get the water?
Yeah.
Right. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, he must be so smart compared to all of the other people for generations that have worked on. We've never had water in Southern Utah. Ivans didn't have water until the early 1900s. And then Hurricane, when they settled, legitimately has no water unless you pump the water to Hurricane. It doesn't get water. It's completely dry. And Nanette told me that. I was like, really? She's like, yeah, the entire water table is below and there's no wells. Like, it doesn't have any water. And I'm like, that's crazy, right? So like thinking of that was a history. And this guy on Facebook is like, but where are we going to get the water? You're like, you don't think we've thought about that? You don't think that there's like 500,000 people working on this problem? Maybe 500,000, but you know what I mean?
Well, and we've done so well in Southern Utah. One of the things that we've done that's so strategic and so smart is we've had the foresight to build Quell, to build Sand Hollow, to build Gunlock. These reservoirs are our savings accounts, right? And they're basically full with this great winter that we've had.
Right.
And then we take the watershed, and that's kind of our checking account. It's what we spend while we save down. Well, our savings sometimes spends down a little bit over those hot summer months, but for us to be able to add an additional 60,000 square foot acre feet reservoir of secondary water will be so huge to just kind of diversify. I mean, our local source is basically the Virgin River Basin.
Yeah.
But I want to pivot just a little bit and tell you something that's really cool that we're doing in Washington. And if you're on that board, go to that middle tab where it says Water Advanced Metering Infrastructure. This is something that we've been right on the front of, in addition to our landscape conservation ordinance that helps new development, new construction, build a local or desert scape in their yards, because so much of our water is unnecessarily being used for landscaping, and we need to preserve that for interior uses. But this has been fantastic. So these are basically smart meters. So rather than old school where the meter reader walks around and looks at, 5th of the month to 5th of the next month, how much water have you used, send it to the utility office, they send you a bill. This is real-time water usage based on your smart meter.
Yeah.
And so it basically is transmitted electronically through some towers within the city, and the data is in real time. So some of the things that this does is, and one thing that we didn't anticipate is, initially we could see that there were hundreds, if not 1,000 or more, just leaks in people's homes.
Yeah.
So my utility office can call and say, hey, it appears that you have a leak.
Yeah.
Would you mind getting that taken care of so that we're not just wasting away so much water? So,
or just warn you before your bill's going to show up. You're going to wonder why the bill's that way. And let me tell you ahead of time that it's probably because you got a leak.
Yeah,
somewhere.
but the frustrating thing with water is, on utilities, you have to charge what it costs, and the value of that water is not what we're charging for it now. So the little bit that they might pay in that leak is not as consequential as it is just the public awareness and say, hey, we do something about that leak. But I can pull out my phone, and this link here on our city website instructs people how to do it. But I can pull up this app that says my water usage, and I can pull up and I can find my usage by hour, by day, by month. I can kind of compare typical lot size with what others are using. And so what I start to do with this is I start to take ownership.
Yeah.
Because I see what my usage is. And I've been so impressed and surprised, not really surprised, but impressed positively, that when people start to recognize that water is a big deal, they morally want to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And this is a tool with modern technology that helps them do that.
It's true. Yeah. I would say too, the idea of conservation being the public doesn't care, that's crazy to me. I think everybody in Southern Utah cares, because they know if we don't get water, I have to move, and I don't want to move from here. Most people really like living here.
Natural resource stewardship in the desert, water, whatever.
It's
care. Not a left issue. It's not a right issue. It's just a human issue.
Yeah.
And so I've been so impressed. I mean, our cities and across the community, we've removed what we call non-functional turf, grass that doesn't have a purpose. You look at what the Conservancy District is doing. We're offering $2 a square foot to remove and replace grass with natural desert scape.
Right.
And we have more applications than we can keep up with. So you can't tell me that this community doesn't see a problem and just morally want to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And I love that. It's not a left or right. It's not a Republican, Democrat. It's hey, we love where we live. We want to do the right thing.
Well, and then also I would argue, because we have to defend ourselves against national media coming in and acting like they know exactly what they're talking about Southern Utah and what we believe. Jon Stewart, I was bugged. I was really bugged. I stopped watching it.
Yeah.
Well, not Jon Stewart.
The guy was at CNN.
Last week tonight with John Oliver. John Oliver did the hit piece. It was a complete hit piece in Southern Utah. Has literally left out all valid opposing arguments and slanted that so horribly, and then it made us look like a bunch of jackasses. And that wasn't. I don't think that's a fair representation.
Well,
of Southern
and
Utah.
why? And why? Water flows to the money, and the money's in Nevada. It's in California, and so
California specifically,
we're an easy target. I mean, for crying out loud, to start back where we were talking about before on air, we don't even have a congressman in our district.
Yeah.
Well, right now, but we potentially don't. So we need someone who understands our issue, who can fight for us on, multiple fronts.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. Well, okay, how are we doing on time?
I have no idea. I'm just enjoying the conversation.
It's 11:30. It's 11:30.
I'll talk as long as you want.
So, my question, I was going to have an opposing. I was going to try to argue with you. I'm having a hard time now. Blake, are you tracking? How's the episode going?
Oh, this is great.
What do you? What's a question you would have for the mayor? Because I never come prepared with notes.
Let's talk about attainable housing.
Okay, let's do it.
Talk about housing.
Let's do it.
Let's go back to the map.
Okay.
Because I listened to, there's an old school.
Oh, now I remember what I was going to say. So looking back, if we zoom into the field, just look for all the farms, right?
Yeah.
Zoom into the field. Looking back, we have the sprawl. Pull back just a little more. Okay. If we're looking at the fields area, we did a lot of urban sprawl.
Yes.
We have quite a bit of farmland left still in the if I'm looking at it like this, in the fields. How are we going to do it? Are we going to continue to urban sprawl, or can we make some adjustments? Is there enough time to where we can make some adjustments, keep some of the farms, like actually keep the farms, instead of saying, hey, we'll have a 5-acre single residence, property. How do we preserve this?
Yeah.
And then build in the hills like they do in Switzerland.
So if we talked about that.
Yeah.
Yes.
You told me that.
Yes.
I was like, this is great. This is a brilliant perspective.
Because, my roots are from a farming family. And so honestly, I lament when I drive through these fields, or when I see this beautiful green patchwork of alfalfa fields that, this land by owners, or, is passed down to next generations who may or may not be farming. It all has a general plan land use designation.
Mm-hmm.
Much of it has zoning. Some of it even have platted entitlements.
Mm-hmm.
And so I worry that at some point, future generations will wonder why we call this the Washington Fields. Now, I wish I had the power as mayor to come in and preserve farming. But at the end of the day, a lot of what we do is in response to individual property owners. Mm-hmm. Now, I love the fact that my cousin is holding out with 20 plus or so acres on. She says she'll farm forever, and I hope she does. Mm-hmm. But many of these other fields are gradually transitioning into residential. I joke, we kind of talk about it and say, historically the fields have been great for growing crops. Now they're great for growing families and people, and that's important too.
Fair enough, yeah.
But the homes in the fields are typically larger lots and more estate, and we don't have much commercial down there. And I think that's one of the things that draws people to that area. But yeah, it's just a matter of time.
I think what struck me with what you said, just for everybody listening, tell me the story again that you told me the other day.
So we hosted Jordan Hess down at the farm for kind of one of his kickoff meet the delegate nights, and I remembered that we did that for Kress Staheli about 12 or 13 years ago when he first ran, and I thought,
cool, yeah.
And in that conversation during that event, right before the event. Then just Kress Staheli had a conversation with my Uncle Ralph, who is just an old school farmer. Mm-hmm. And our roots, as yours come from Scotland, ours come from Switzerland. And he used some choice words to wonder why in the, what.
Why the hell?
Yeah. And he's made swearing an art form in some cases.
Me too. Sweet.
But he's wondering why we would ever build houses on farm ground. And he said, and he looked back to his heritage and said, in Switzerland, we build on the hillsides and we retain that farm ground, that fertile soil for life-sustaining food. And so, but how do you do that when this property sells for $500,000 an acre? I mean, I don't, and then just the...
But the value of that land in Switzerland was it was uncalculable. It was worth so much money that you didn't put anything on it because it was valuable to life because it's food.
And we might wake up one morning and realize
we could easily get to the point. Call me conspiracy theorist or like the super skeptic, but some people are really optimistic and see the future for being always good, right? And if I take 1 second and blink my eyes, I can think, what if all of a sudden the trucks stop coming into southern Utah? We're out of food, and then we built on all the stuff that we would have been able to do. We'd have to leave. We would literally have to we'd be diaspora. We'd be scattered.
When you go back to the roots of this community,
that's not a good idea if we want to live here forever.
Well, the roots from Ivan, Santa Clara through St. George over to Washington, historically, back kind of when my parents' generation was growing up and prior generations, it was gardening, farming, and exporting by truck produce to these other areas.
Yeah.
I mean, it was onions and carrots and radishes and beets. And then you can kind of see where the canal went down, and it was alfalfa to provide the beef and, to feed the cattle. My grandpa wouldn't even have horses because they wasted the alfalfa that he could feed for his cows that provided food and provided a living. Yeah. So horses to him were a waste. Yeah. Now they're fun to ride, but not for his model.
Yeah. And the only reason he's got a horse is so he can go move the cattle. And
for his, it was a tractor and feedlot, right? It wasn't
exactly.
We don't need a horse.
I know the side by sides now. A lot of farmers they're just to get on the side by side. They don't. Yeah. Now there's a few.
Have we gone too far? Right?
Shout out to James Haley. But Texas is full of land. But at the same time, if we don't get food from the outside, we have 3 days and we're out of food.
We lose our independence.
I can't help but think, the alfalfa fields, the rules about if you don't use your water, you lose it, I think is a disservice to us because we don't want to use it right this second. We there's potentially a lot of farms that they would just they'd stop pouring water on it if they knew they would keep their water rights and they could start it back up if they wanted to change something.
And that's why the district is such an important part, right? Because you have the district, then you have the canal company, which runs separately. But for us to be able to consider this all as one water, store it, redistribution, that Warner Valley Reservoir becomes super critical.
Right. And in turning the fields into houses conserves the water, but it conserves the water forever. And then where do we grow stuff, right? And so
Burl.
So that's a great point.
I mean, really,
that's a great point. So there's some
but they have major water issues up maybe further north.
But yeah, well, because Enterprise is our line, right? Our water district, as Utah goes, is like literally the center of Enterprise. The only reason I know that because I had to do transfer water rights. So I'm like, where's the line? It's literally that street, like dead center in Enterprise.
Yeah,
half the city's in one water.
I spoke too soon, but yeah, they have their own water issues.
But if we're having to worry about food, that might be it. There's a worst case scenario we could go that way, but I don't know. It does kind of break my heart to turn all those into just quarter acre lots, and then they're just concrete roofed. I have a feeling, I have a love for the aesthetic of life, right? I do love art. It's one of my favorite things. And I love architecture on top of that. I love city design. When I think of what could be downtown St. George and you make it like a big towers and things like that, I'm like, aren't we already surrounded by concrete? If you look around, you're already surrounded by red concrete. But could you make buildings beautiful downtown that as you're walking, it's beautiful and you walk out and it's still beautiful?
So since I've been in office, I reached back out to an architect that I met years ago, and he's from Georgia, Will Barnes, super talented. He's got a couple of partners, Bill and Jonathan. We've actually had them in town for the last 2 or 3 days. And we're looking at, what does the aesthetics, what does the site look like to best use? And they're encouraging density, right? They're encouraging better use because if we want to create walkable, usable spaces, then we need to activate it with density. We're also looking at our downtown. But one thing that was we got joking about our community, and we talked about our commitment to God and our commitment to country. And then jokingly we added, and good architecture. But over the last few days, what I've realized is when applicants come into my city hall and they pitch to my council on their projects, it's typically not the architect. I mean, once in a while it is. We have fantastic engineers, right? Engineers are, can we do it? Architects are more creative. They're more, should we do it? How do we do it? So I think one thing that they kind of pointed out is that we've worked with some architects out here. We've worked with some really good ones, and we've worked with some others. But if you go back into the South and the East, the architecture, I think that's something that our community is missing. So when we're trying to elevate Scottsdale and we're trying to revitalize and re-energize our downtown, and what does that look like? Which is going to be needed to be activated with some density in order to and some vertical growth. We've got to really be thinking in terms of not just engineering,
right?
Because that's like the just utilitarian, but
cost. Because there's a big argument that cost is like, well, just make them square sheds out there by the airport, and then people will go work in the factories like that. Like if you don't add the aesthetic into it, and the aesthetic costs money, truthfully,
yes.
So,
but for the kind of community we're building in Washington, we're committed to God, country, and good architecture going forward.
I like it,
and it's paying off. We're seeing really valuable, attractive things, and by good architecture, not discounting any engineer, but by doing this, we can have some of those densities that allow for workforce housing. It can allow for, my young adult children to get into careers and to put a roof over their head. And a roof over their head that's not just renting from someone else at a rate that prohibits them from ever buying.
Right.
That's critical. And when we have time before we end, I want to point out one subdivision that we got spot on right ahead of this.
That. Let's just go right into there.
So go out on Washington Dam Road, out to Country Way. You see the little blue dots there. Go just north, right in that cluster, that very middle one on the south side. Try that one.
Riverbend.
Riverbend. Go to the next one, just over the other way, right there. That right? Yes, that one. Okay, Red Trails at Sunrise Valley. If you look at that, it says 41 units on like 4 acres.
Okay.
Do the math on that.
Yeah.
How many units per acre is that?
10 units per acre.
Yeah, like technically 11, but really close to average to 10. But what we did on this one is, our council was cognizant of the need for housing that could be owned, but in maybe not as traditional of a manner. So if you look at this plat, you're seeing that we have reduced side yard setbacks.
Right.
We have reduced front and rear setbacks. And then you see that little bubble on the cul-de-sac there? That's a trail that connects down to the new Sunrise Valley Park.
Oh, cool.
And this is just a phase, and there are going to be future phases of this. But what this does...
And then they have different square footages, too. You have some bigger, you have some smaller.
Different styles.
It looks like 3 different sizes.
Yeah, click on the next thing over, see what it shows. I haven't prepped on this, but yeah, so it's Riverbend.
We're always winging it on this show, man.
And Red Trails, but more of the stuff on kind of the southeast side, they're going to have higher densities with, single story, 2-story, 4 or 5 different floor plans, and then it connects to a regional park. But these are opportunities for, and I'm hoping, families or single working can be able to buy a home, have a roof over the head that's not for rent, but then have access to shared amenities with that new beautiful Sunrise Valley Park,
and not only that,
our trail system.
Yeah, and then Long Valley Road's right there, so you got DR Horton, right up there. You're not going to be far away from the future, reservoir, right?
Absolutely.
And that it's going to be a recreational reservoir, right? It's going to be big enough to where you're going to be boat.
Well, it's going to be awesome
on it, right?
And it's going to, and Washington City intends to oversee that.
Yeah.
So we're going to work to oversee the recreational amenities. But even on this, if you go south on that on the trail system along the Virgin River Trail, you get down to our Sullivan Soccer Park.
Oh yeah, that's right. It just ends up right there.
So the kind of the concept is we're building these communities within the city, and we're trying to do our best. There's a lot of moving parts, but these regional parks like Sunrise Valley, Sullivan, and the new Wills Park, these are hubs that then have these spurs of trails off that connect.
Nice.
So it becomes a lifestyle living here. And we're starting to rethink in areas where we can, what are our densities? Are we going vertical? Are we reducing the setbacks? And again, I would push back just a little bit on the building community as well. And I can do this as a mayor, but I would push back and say, look, you're talking about affordable housing. You're saying you guys aren't doing it right. I would say, what are you modeling in your parade of homes? Are you modeling the missing middle? Are you modeling duplexes and fourplexes that are for sale?
Yeah.
I mean, right now in my city, I have probably 1,500 multifamily units in various stages of entitlement.
Yeah.
Mostly along I-15. So we're doing our part for density.
For density and zoning.
But then you go from these apartments all the way to these, I don't care what your R1 acreage of your lot is. What we're missing, though, other than some townhomes here and there, is creative spaces for people to own.
Yeah.
Is it a creative space that is retail on the first floor, office on the second, and housing on the second and third levels that can be owned? These are some of the things I'm saying. Look, don't just turn to government to solve all the problems, but private sector lead out on some of these things.
So going to that point, because I appreciate your point on this. I think it's really valid. It is, and it's a great pushback, because a lot of times the feeling of nothing's being done. So affordable housing, why it's important to me is like, we haven't kept up with the building over 10 years. There's a lot of reasons for that. Very small part of it is government. A small part of it is government, right? But a big part of it was our workforce left because the housing market
In those cycles,
the skilled labor left, and then it didn't come back. It went to the oil fields and stayed there. And I use that example, and Danielle Larkin, she's like, yeah, that was my cousin. I was like, yeah, it was a lot of people's cousins. It was hundreds and hundreds of skilled builders left Southern Utah and didn't come back, right?
They absolutely did.
So then you can't really build very many houses if you don't have enough people to build them, right? So a lot of moving parts as to how we got to where we're at. But what I really want to focus on is get educated on what is actually happening, especially in your own city. But look at the macro and say, are these permits being pulled? Are these plans being made? And in Washington City, I think for sure you guys have really taken a lead and torch and high
go
density.
Back to the high level view of our city. You can see all of the projects
that you're rolling.
And what I've said from day one is I said, look, we are so heavy residential. I said, we're not chasing residential growth. It's chasing us. We're not running away from it. I mean, it's hard to keep up with. It's a lot of work. But we are trying to go after some of those commercial projects and those things that complete and balance a community with the services. Kind of like the options for housing needs a balanced approach, and we're still missing some of that middle ground.
So there's a 2-acre parcel that's next to where Rally's Red Barn. They took over the car wash, right? And they've built that cool building, which I'm so glad
it's great.
Really
my cousin Robbie's building it.
Okay, yeah. So I talked to them, but there's there's a parcel right next to it that's for sale, right? It's been for sale forever.
That's the Adams piece, Vicky's.
Yeah. So apparently the thought was maybe the liquor store would go there. The funding came in, it wasn't going to match, the right amount of money, right? But then also the location is probably better suited to where it's going to go now.
Yes.
And I would agree with that. So I looked at that to do exactly what you just said. Do, retail or like a dentist office, hopefully a restaurant, something like that on the bottom floor.
And that view over the cotton factory.
It's a beautiful
Absolutely.
view, right?
And the Mill Creek.
So I was like, oh, well, maybe I could do a high-end restaurant, right? Do a high-end restaurant that actually is a 2-story. So you kind of push it up into the, the setback. I had this great idea. And I could actually put 22 residential 1-bedroom apartments, right? Condos. Okay. And they'd be for sale. I didn't want to rent them out. You just sell them off to, this little old couple that wants a place down here, but they don't need to live on a golf course. They don't want to, have an HOA that's paying for, a swimming pool they're never going to go to, right? So, 22 units. When you start running the numbers on a spreadsheet, it's a $9 million project. And no matter what, it's going to at least take me 2 years to even get the meter to be able to get started. Then I got to find a restaurant to actually do it. So then I'm starting to put all the pieces together and you're like, that is a massive undertaking. And there's 3 homes on it that we got to knock down, right? Like, so thinking about the redevelopment, they're massive undertakings. It's a lot harder.
And it's harder to redevelop than to develop new. And I think that's some of that advantage that we have in our downtown,
I love
right
that
at the cross section of our
point.
Telegraph and Main. I mean, remember, we have a new Main Street interchange coming on.
Once we build it, that's what we get.
Yeah. And so we're going to have to kind of create that vision of what does that downtown look like, right? Is it becoming of these beautiful neighborhoods? And how do we attract the livable space and the retail and the restaurant and the entertainment? What's the city's part in creating activities down there that draw people to our downtown? Because that's part of what might be missing in our community. The architects that were in town there, they said, it's so weird out here. All of your homes have block walls around them. and I thought about that. I said, well, I've never really considered that before because I just kind of grew up with that.
Yeah.
But he said, back where we come from, it's open. And now you start seeing so many of these developments that are car-centered rather than people-centered. They want to drive through the car wash. They want to drive through and get their soda. But as we're trying to create these nodes, these commercial nodes in these spaces, we need some density to activate it. We need to get people out of their cars, back on their feet, and interacting as a community, like person to person.
Yeah.
And so there are so many aspects to building a community, but
And then you get the pushback, right? There's I was on the Nextdoor app, right? And it's like, public notice, they're trying to change density, this, high density in this field over in Santa Clara.
Oh yeah.
And the pressure, my question was, why should I oppose high density going here? Like, explain this to me. Because they're like, when will the vacation rentals and high density ever stop?
Yeah.
And I'm like,
and those are separate issues, by the way. Let's
totally
keep those separate.
Yeah, totally separate issues. And Santa Clara, over its entire history, the oldest city in the southern Utah, their first apartment complex is being finished. Their very first one.
Yeah.
That, to me, is no plan on affordable housing, right? That's like, nope, we're not going to do it. It's not going to happen. We have no plan for it. We're going to have a population of 10,000. That's it, right? Because we don't want anything else. And they're pretty much built out in Santa Clara. So this the very last speck of, space to where you could actually have an affordable house in Santa Clara and Ivins. And the neighbors are like, not here. You could do it anywhere else. You could do it in Burl, but you can't do it here, right? And so it's interesting to me that it's just a never-ending battle too, because it's been going on.
And you
forever.
make a great point, because different cities, they take on different personalities of what they want and who they're going to be. But if you're choosing, I mean, I sent you over that. Do you have that other little graphic that I sent over?
Oh, I didn't have it. I didn't send it to
it's
him.
Okay,
but it's so good.
But it's
I'll post
interesting.
it. I'll post it so they can.
It's
they can
interesting how okay, we're choosing less density, but we still want low taxes. So then, what's the result of that? Less services. Am I going to be able to fund my police? Am I going to be able to fund my fire? Am I going to be able to maintain my roads? There's kind of this triangle of give and take of what communities have to choose they're going to be.
Yeah.
And it's not always easy.
It's not always easy.
We're a young city, we're a growing city, and we have needs in our public safety. We have needs to add, a fire station in Sienna Hills and one on the south end of the fields. And we have need for ambulance service. Right now, Gold Cross is staging in St. George and covering Washington, and Hurricane Valley is covering our east side. So, but there's only so much in our budget. I mean, for example, if you added up our sales tax and property tax revenue annually, we're spending 90% of that revenue from the general fund on those two items towards public safety. Yeah. So you see but yet at the same time, we want to have well-maintained roads. We want to have some of these parks and open spaces. And so there are so many competing interests when it comes to, to creating a community that has a high and elevated, quality of life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, man, we could dive into a whole bunch more, but I think that we could call that an episode for the day. Thanks for coming on here and doing this. I'm excited. I hope you come back, and then we can
I totally will
keep rolling and watch these developments as they play out. Give me one tip if you're running for city council in Washington, because there's not very many running, and this is what I thought was funny. I'd love your opinion on this. St. George has 18 people running, and I guess word on the street is it's only 17 because someone already dropped out.
Okay,
but you guys only have 8. You still have 3 seats open. There's 8. 6 are going to make it out of the. Is that true or no?
So we initially had 6 register
or
file, which means we wouldn't need a primary,
right?
And then we had 1 drop. So we have 5, our 3 incumbents plus 2 others.
Okay.
I think what people are seeing in Washington right now is they love the direction we're going.
Yeah.
We have this great culture. We're pulling together as mayor, as council, as executive staff. They like that direction.
They're doing well.
And so why is there a need to change? So, I appreciate each of the candidates, but certainly the 3 that are currently working on this team, they bring so much to this group that I'm hopeful that we can continue to just pull together and progress and take advantage of these really exciting opportunities and see them through because we're on such a great trajectory, right? So I think that's the difference. But that said, I have so much respect for Mayor Randall and for those in St. George. I really love and appreciate them. And like our other communities, this is such a special place. And really, we need St. George to be successful.
Yeah.
Their success is our success. And collectively, we just need to continue to, grapple with these issues and figure them out one by one. But you're doing your part in bringing them up and getting the word out to the public.